today's Q&A portion of the talk. If you did not receive a piece of paper when you came in, please raise your hand and one of our volunteers will come by and give you paper for you to write the questions on. They will then be passed up to me and I will address the questions to the speaker. So, Jordan,
yes.
Excellent talk. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You mentioned that you have a degree in art history. Can you tell us more about when, other degrees, etc.? What's your educational history?
Well, my educational history, I started off, I went to a classics college, and I studied there for a year intensively. I studied things like Latin, Greek, history of medicine, the history of philosophy, history of art, everything like that. It was a very intensive program. We crammed about 3 years of school into one there. Lots of homework every single day. And then from there I went to a private institution where I specialized in things like literature, British literature, romantic literature, poetry, art history. I took a little bit of Asian history as well when I was in university. And really I think the best educator though is life.
Okay, and obviously you're in Korea now.
I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up here, how long you've been here, and what's your employment history then?
Okay, well, I've been here for about 3 years. I started my 4th year about a month ago. I've been teaching at Samyook Elementary School for the entire time. It's an English immersion school in Juwodong. It's an excellent school. The kids are almost all fluent in English, and my job is to teach science. I mean, that's very surprising with my degrees, but I have to teach science to the children, and it's been a lot of fun. I decided to come to Korea. I hate to say it, but it was actually a second choice. I originally, like most people, decided to move to Japan. When I was in grade 8, I was like, I'm going to teach in Japan someday. And Japan, I found out, was way too expensive for me to live and pay off student loans at the same time. So I looked for better options. And the best option was South Korea. And so I made the application. I said to a recruiter, I'd like to end up at a school, just somewhere that pays well and treats me well. And they said, okay, we have just the place for you. They sent me to Samyook, and the rest is history. I've loved my entire experience so far.
Excellent. I know firsthand that you're a well-traveled individual, and you did mention that you've taken a train across Europe as well. Can you talk a little bit about comparing your traveling in Asia with some of your other travels in Europe or elsewhere?
Well, I'm going to start with the similarity that I've noted. The similarity between Europe and Asia is they both have respect for history. For example, when I went to Belgium, there was a city there called Ghent, and right in the middle of everything there was a gigantic castle dating back to the 15th century. And they take care of that castle, they look after it, and it's the same thing in Asia. There's a respect for history in Europe and Asia that you really don't see in, say, North America. I mean, in North America, you hear all these horror stories of like old 100-year-old buildings being ripped down to make place for an office building. But in a place like Asia, like Korea, for example, there's a lot of history here, a lot of places that you can visit and really see the respect for other countries and its own history as well. And I would say differences between traveling between Europe and Asia. Europe is a lot more Western. There's a lot more English around for you to be able to find your way around. When you're in Asia, you kind of have to learn the language. When I did Russia, I actually had to learn to read Cyrillic to be able to find my way around some places. Europe is a lot more tourist-friendly. Places like Russia and China, you need to have a little bit better understanding of the local languages to be able to get around.
Okay.
But that's part of the adventure, though, is learning those languages and really kind of becoming a part of the culture by learning them.
Of course. You started off your presentation with one of the first pictures you showed was a picture from a book, and you talked about how this train train trip was close to fulfilling a childhood travel dream.
Yes.
Have you been able to fulfill any other childhood travel dreams?
Actually, Japan. It was always my dream to travel in Japan and see some of the sites around there. And I don't want to say luckily, but there was a fire at Samyook Elementary School right before I arrived there. And so we got an entire month off instead of the regular 2 weeks. And that was a blessing in disguise because I got to spend a whole month in Japan. So that was unlocking that. Learning an Asian language, for example, was another goal of mine, and I've learned to read Korean. Now I just need to get a handle of actually speaking it.
Okay, let's move on to this specific trip a little bit. You mentioned that you try to find out-of-the-way places. You're not someone who wants to hit what the Lonely Planet recommends.
Yeah.
However, for your travels in these 3 countries across China, Mongolia, and Russia, Mongolia specifically, is there any kind of book that you would recommend for travel?
My way of traveling is I actually put in a Google search for the country or area that I'm visiting. And any images that really speak to me, I look out on how I can visit there. And really, I didn't use any books to know what to visit. I wish I could give a reference like that. I just don't have one. My way of traveling is Google image search, and whatever looks good, I'll try and make my way there. And so it's a lot of internet research. Really invaluable is actually Wikitravel. Wikitravel actually has a lot of information on very small places that you would never expect to find on there.
Okay. A little bit more about the kind of details of your travel. Were you having to change currency between each one of these stops? Did you have currency ready before you went, or was there anything that was accepted as a common currency across these 3 countries you traveled?
Well, I mean, in Russia, they do accept American currency, but and the same with Mongolia, I guess. But the thing is that I didn't want to just use a common currency. I wanted to use a currency that was local. One of the things that I do for trips is I actually try to keep some of the denominations of bills, paper money, and coins that they use. I just try to keep them for myself, add them to my own personal collection of currency from around the world. And so what I did is I changed all my money over beforehand, and that pretty much set how much money I was able to spend in each country. And so if you force yourself to keep to a budget in each country that you visit, you are more likely to find alternate things to do than the tourist things, or alternate routes, or alternate, I guess, different things to see than what you normally would. If you're just throwing out your debit card or throwing out cash for every single thing you see, then you're going to do all those big, expensive things. But if you limit yourself to, say, $300 American in local cash, then you have to find, okay, I can't do that, but I can do this, which is largely the same. And I think those sorts of experiences, I think they really lend to traveling, is you limit your budget, and then you're forced to look at things from a different perspective.
Okay, one of the interesting slides you showed us was a Chinese vineyard. Did you get a chance to try any Chinese wine while you were there?
There were opportunities to do it. One of the things that Beijing is very infamous for is restaurants hire locals to go out and make conversation with foreigners and bring them into a restaurant, and then the locals dash and you're left to foot the bill. And so that's part of the thing that happens. Other times the locals just stay in there and they expect you and they encourage you to enjoy more and more traditional dishes, and then they say, oh, we don't have any money though, so you have to pay for everything, and you're not allowed to leave the restaurant until you pay. And so one of my a person that I met at a hostel in Beijing, he fell for it. Having traveled as much as I did, I was able to see right through it. I warned him. I was like, no, don't go. He's like, no, no, they're cute. And that was that. He was led into the shadow of death.
What about, so you just mentioned that you stayed in a hostel.
Yes.
In Beijing. What are some of your favorite lodgings for your travels?
Hostels, or just maybe laying out a blanket on the ground in the middle of nowhere and just sleeping there. When I was in Japan, I slept on a park bench for a couple nights. It's very safe there. You can leave your stuff around and just do absolutely nothing. You can leave your backpack right there, untouched. I had a friend once in Japan. She forgot a bag in the middle of a shopping center, and it had her passport, her money, everything in there. She finally got back there 3 days later. It was in the exact same spot with all the stuff still in it. And she was, apparently that's the norm. And I like to think that that would happen here as well. I have heard stories of people forgetting something and it's just getting back to them like 4 days later with everything intact. But yeah, my favorite lodgings, I like hostels because you meet new people. And I also like just finding a place to curl up in the middle of nowhere.
Now you mentioned some of the people that you've met on this trip in particular. Have you managed to keep in touch with anyone you met on the train or in hostels, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I really enjoy doing is keeping in communication with the people that I've met on my travels and traveling to wherever they are at another time. For example, the couple from New Zealand, I've got an open invitation to visit them at their home in Wellington. And then they've got a little cottage up in the middle of nowhere in northern New Zealand. And so they said that if I ever go stay with them, that they'll take me up and whoever travels with me up to that really private location as well. And the same thing stands for places like Poland, Italy, other places in Russia, Uzbekistan, lots of different locations. And that's the beauty of travel. You make connections that will save you money in the future and are actually good lasting friendships as well because they have the same values.
So, of the places you were on this trip, and maybe some of the other travels that you've done in the past, where were some of the best places that you've been where you would want to go again?
Well, definitely Italy. Italy was definitely a place I would like to go again. Gyeongju in South Korea, actually, I can travel there as many times as I want, and I'm never going to get sick of it. I love the whole history surrounding the Shilla period and everything like that. I love the figure of, I think it's Kim Yu-shin. I love that historical figure. I love all the history that is steeped in Gyeongju. And pretty much the attachment between ancient China and ancient Korea as well. Other places that I would like to visit, I would love to go to Japan again, but it wouldn't be for a few years after kind of this scare has passed by. I would like to go to Russia again. Pretty much any country that I have visited, I would love to go there again. Because the first time it's more of just like a flurry of excitement because you're going through it, and that I would love to visit each place a second time just to be able to go through it more slowly and at my own pace and able to understand what's happening when I'm doing it.
And can you briefly remark on how do you go about making the most of your travel and balancing that with your real life or your teaching career?
Traveling for me is not about going to fancy restaurants, fancy clubs and stuff like that. I largely go with the approach where I'll wake up at about 6 o'clock in the morning and I'll have a good breakfast, plan my route for the day, what I'm going to do, and probably, most likely hike around. I prefer walking around cities than taking public transit because I find you can miss a lot of things in public transit. But walking around, I usually end up back at my hostel or my home by about midnight, and then I do the whole thing the next day. And the way that I see traveling is not as a relaxing thing. I see it as a way to make the rest of your life seem like a vacation. You push yourself to your absolute limits, when you are traveling. And that way, when you get back home, you're like, okay, I did that amount of living. Now it's time to relax again and enjoy what I do back at home. Integrating the two, I think it's very important. You can't travel your entire life. You need to integrate real life, real responsibilities with travel. And they make for it makes for a very good fusion of lifestyles. To have responsibilities and to have, you still have responsibilities as a traveler. You need to, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to present yourself as a wonderful, loving, caring human being as you travel. It's hard work being a traveler.
Okay. Well, your talk has generated a lot of questions, but we just have time for one more. If you had a question that was unanswered, please feel free to talk to Jordan in person after the talk. He's a nice guy. So just to finish up, Jordan, can you please tell us what's on your schedule for your next visit? What's your next place to go see?
My next trip, I am planning on taking the train from Bangkok through Malaysia to Singapore.
Oh.
And I'm going to spend 3 weeks doing that.
Sounds great. All right, let's thank Jordan for asking our questions.